Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on the show. Do you ever find yourself bottling up your emotions instead of speaking your mind? We all experience painful feelings like anxiety, stress, inadequacy, doubt, and confusion, and most of us spend our entire lives trying to run from them. In fact, research shows that many of us would rather withstand electrical shocks than sit with our own thoughts. But our guest today reminds us that these painful feelings are not here to torment us, but to call us into our next level of power. We're here with Dr. Julia DiGangi, a neuropsychologist who completed her residency at Harvard Medical School, Boston University School of Medicine, and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Dr. DiGangi has nearly 2 decades of experience studying the connection between our brains and our behavior, and she shows people how to harness the power of the brain to lead more satisfying and emotionally intelligent lives. Before we get there, a quick plug. According to a recent survey by the Vision Council, nearly 80% of us are on some sort of screen before going to bed, myself included. So what's the problem? Well, according to research, the light emitted from screens is linked to a growing number of issues, including disrupted sleep, headaches, as well as other digital eye strain symptoms. So if you'd like to protect your eyes from the most problematic wavelengths of artificial blue light, take a gander at our premium blue blocking glasses from wildrx.com. My Aura Ring sleep data agrees that wearing these blue blockers after sundown makes a massive positive difference in sleep quality. And as a thanks for being a listener, you can use the code WILD20 for an extra 20% off your entire order. Right now, we're only in the US, but if you'd like to grab your discount on the highest quality blue blockers around, just visit wildrx.com and use the code WILD20 at checkout, and you'll get 20% off. If you're just getting started with blue blocking glasses, I encourage you to check out the yellow daytime lenses. And if you'd like the most protection, especially after sundown, check out the nighttime lenses at wildrx.com. Thanks for checking it out. And if you find this free show valuable and you have a moment, please hit that like button, click subscribe, and share this show with someone you care about. Bonus points if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much. All right, on to the show with Dr. Julia DiGangi. On this episode, you'll discover why scrolling on our phones is so addictive, how to conquer doubt to become more confident, why it's important to speak your mind instead of bottling up negative emotions, why our brains are obsessed with negative feedback, how to transmute your emotional pain into power, and much more. Let's go hang out with Dr. DiGangi. Welcome back, folks. Joining us today is Dr. Julia DiGangi, a neuropsychologist, founder of NeuroHealth Partners, and author of Energy Rising, the Neuroscience of Leading with Emotional Power. Dr. DiGangi has spent nearly 2 decades studying the connection between our brains and our behavior and working with leaders at the White House Press Office, global companies, international NGOs, and the U.S. Special Forces. Thanks so much for being here, Dr. DiGangi.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start with something that you say in your work, that the brain is the ultimate electrical machine.
It's got to be true. It's got to be true. So I think I'm a neuropsychologist, which means I'm a clinical psychologist with specialized expertise in the brain. And the reason I came to the brain is I just think that it has all of the secrets to our lives' problems. And I think there's so much wonderful science. So I talk a lot about energy in my work, the energy of emotion specifically. And I'm not speaking metaphorically, I'm certainly not speaking metaphysically. The brain is quite literally an electrical machine that is running you through your life, powered primarily on the energy of your emotions.
And some of this energy is largely misdirected, especially in modern times. So what can we do to make sure that we're not experiencing the wrong kind of pain or trying to avoid pain altogether, as you mentioned, which could be a huge mistake?
So, one thing I'd love to do is just zoom out a little bit and say what I think is a really useful model because before we get into pain, I do talk about my work through this lens of emotional pain and emotional power. I think what we're all on this quest for is more emotional power. And by emotional power, I mean confidence, I mean authenticity, I mean wholeness, I mean connection, I mean all the things we want to be satisfied in our lives. So, let me first talk about what emotions are. So, emotions are quite literally neuroelectrical zings of energy that are communicating with your body and then driving behavior. Okay. So you can really think about your emotions as the Google Maps of your life. So your emotions are these neurobiological signals, this guidance system that's really there to tell you what relationships you should stay in, which ones you should leave, what jobs you should stay in, which ones you should leave, which risks you should pursue versus which ones you want to leave. But what happens to a lot of us, and this now gets into this idea of emotional pain, is we're like driving down the little road of our life, and our GPS is like, immediately at the next intersection, turn right and immediately exit this conversation. Immediately get off this highway and find a new relationship or a new job. And what do? We're like, mm-mm, we like hit the intersection, we turn left, we turn left, we turn left. Now you do this once, twice, hundreds of times in your life, no problem. I mean, the biology is very resilient. But what a lot of us are doing is perpetually living out of alignment with this internal neurobiological GPS system. So if you're not following the signals that are telling you where you want to go, we can't then really be surprised when we end up in places we don't really want to be. So much of this reckoning, of this homecoming, and by homecoming, I mean a return to our agency, to our authority, to our power, is fundamentally predicated on having a more intelligent relationship with emotion.
And many of us, especially these days, tend to distract or try to numb that emotion, which in the end only exhausts us even more, right? So maybe you can riff on that a little bit next.
Absolutely. So, okay, I could riff a lot. So feel free to jump in and like redirect me. But the idea here is that when I say emotional pain, I don't mean necessarily like you're writhing in traumatic agony, although I do mean that. I mean any sensation you don't like to feel, I am calling emotional pain. So I just want to be really clear. So I'm talking about stress, I'm talking about frustration, I'm talking about irritation, I'm talking about being mad, being unsatisfied, being afraid, being stressed, being anything. Okay. There's probably thousands of synonyms. So these sensations feel bad in the body. Well, your brain at a very primitive level is wired to avoid anything that feels painful. I'm not just talking on the emotional side, I'm also talking on the physical side, right? So, for example, if I put my hand on a hot stove and I burn my hand, I'm going to yank my hand back. That's incredibly adaptive, right? And in neuropsychology, we call this one trial learning. I am not 15 minutes later or tomorrow or the next day going to say, let me try that again. Maybe today, if I put my hand on a hot stove, it won't burn me. The brain is going to encode that was dangerous, that was painful. Let's never do it again. That's amazing. Okay. But this is a really, really key piece when we're talking about emotional pain. I want you and all of your listeners to reflect on, just take a second and say, what are the things that are really bothering me emotionally in my life right now? And for almost all of us, it's going to be relationships, right? Things that are happening in our marriages, things that are happening with our kids, things that are happening with our jobs. Okay. The problem that is unlike, it's categorically unlike the hot stove is the by the nature of what these emotional problems are, is they are absolutely chronic. Right? I'm not burning my hand on a hot stove 15 times a day, but I'm getting annoyed on social media dozens of times a day, right? I'm having the same conversation with my team at work again and again. I'm having the same conversation with my spouse for 50 years, right? So it's very important to first recognize, to really get clear on this, that our emotional pain is actually coming from these very patterned ways of behaving. Okay, fine. Now, if there was a way to avoid all pain, I would say immediately do it. Like, give me the easy button, right? My sort of scientific area of expertise is most fundamentally trauma, like so trauma, traumatic anxiety in the brain. So I've been called to this line of work because I'm deeply compassionate. I have this, so if there was a way to get people out of pain, that's why I'm doing this work. But a lot of us are living our lives trying to avoid pain the way we would try to avoid gravity. It's like if you came to me and said, "Hey, I'm looking for the one house on the planet where there's no gravity." I would be like, "Well, that sounds like it's going to be a lot of effort and no return." So a lot of us are trying to live our lives, and actually we might not be conscious of this until we have conversations like this, to live a pain-free existence. The problem with this is there is no pain-free option. Okay? So the most powerful question, and I talk about this in Energy Rising, is not how do I avoid pain, but in a world that guarantees me pain, what pain is the most powerful pain? What pain directly works towards my empowerment, to my expansion, to my confidence? So let me give you, I can give you a million examples. I'll give you one quick
Please,
example.
yeah.
So say I want to have a conversation with my partner, okay? But I'm nervous to have the conversation because I think they're not really going to understand me and we're going to get frustrated with each other and it's going to cause a fight. And so I keep my mouth shut. I keep my mouth shut because I think that that's avoiding the pain of the confrontation, the pain of my feelings of anxiety, the pain of my feelings of disconnection. But that's not true. It's an incomplete analysis. By me keeping my mouth shut, I'm sitting with a very real pain, which is I already feel disconnected. I already feel unheard. I already feel upset in my relationship. And most importantly, and this is the biggest piece of all, a lot of times we look to other people and say, "You're not making me feel safe. You're not listening to me. You're not witnessing me. You're not seeing me. You're not hearing me." How in the world? This is a very emotionally mature point here, okay? How in the world is it going to matter if the entire world is safe to me so long as I am willing to be dangerous to myself? I know, maybe not consciously, and I'm not really that interested. I mean, I'm very interested in conscious behavior, but most of the brain's transactions are happening outside of conscious awareness, right? We know this scientifically. So I know, and whether it's conscious or not is up for debate, but I know that I won't advocate for myself. I know that I won't speak up for myself. So, me having to hold the pain of I really can't trust myself, that's another pain point. So when I do this analysis, and in Energy Rising, I show you actually how to do analyses like these, I get to say, okay, if I have to have this conversation with my partner, yeah, then maybe it'll cause maybe there'll be an argument or maybe I'll be misunderstood. Okay, so I really want to get clear on what those pains are. I should be very honest. I should simultaneously get very clear about the other pains of keeping my mouth shut, the self-loathing, the disrespect, the self-abandonment. And then when I'm very clear that there's two options, I have to say which pain is the pain that I choose to empower me more. Now, there's no right answer to this question. I might have a day where I might be in a relationship where I say, you know what? I actually, I look at both of these analyses and I think I am going to choose keeping my mouth shut. But when I do that from a place of awareness and empowerment and self information, it is empowering. Alternatively, if I say, I have been in this relationship for 4 years, 10 years, 40 years, and I constantly have the feeling of walking on eggshells and trying to avoid conflict and trying to appease, I can't do this anymore. So even though I know this is going to be a tough conversation and I'm going to have to feel stress and that is the pain that empowers me more. When we move from a place of reality, meaning there is no option where there's an entirely pain free option, this very paradoxical thing happens. We become more clear, which then makes us become more powerful. And as we become more powerful, our lives start to feel less painful. But you see the paradox. It was only in reckoning with the truth of pain that I actually get out of pain. So I feel like this is it's a counterintuitive message. If I had one word to describe all of my work, I would probably say either counterintuitive or opposite because the brain is a pattern detection machine. So it keeps us doing the same things over and over and over and over again and expecting a different result. So when we really understand how to work with pain, we get to see it's actually a very mighty tool to lead us to the life that we're actually after.
So, if we are suffering from some sort of chronic pain that's kind of bubbling up here and there, but we're not necessarily consciously aware of it, how do we identify what to wrestle with exactly or how to correct that behavior over time?
Can you give me an example?
I guess if you find yourself scrolling on social media or going down conspiracy rabbit holes on YouTube constantly day after day and realizing that, 15, 90 minutes, like 3 hours have passed, or that's how you're spending a large portion of your day, as many people are. Is that what you would actually choose in order to empower yourself? For some people, maybe it would be, but for many people, probably not. Yet we still find ourselves scrolling nonstop.
Yes. So this is the other thing too is like I am so on fire for the brain. I feel like the brain is the most powerful machine. I think it is the most healing thing. I think it is an instrument for social justice. I laugh because I think it's sort of strange to hear a sort of neuropsychologists talk about the brain and social justice. But my point here is we spend more time trying to figure out how to operate our cell phones or operate chat gpt, then we pay attention to the intelligent operation of the most powerful machine we'll ever own, which is our own brain and our own nervous system. So you asked me specifically about social media. We would never say to someone if there was a highly addictive substance, like, how can I continue to use this highly addictive substance and then expect my behavior to be different? So I think we have to have reverence both for the power and the limits of the brain. Scrolling is so all of us scroll so much because it is very addictive to the brain. Okay. So I think there has to be, in other words, I would not try to mow my front lawn with my car because it just wouldn't work. Like that machine would not do that job. So I think we have to have reverence for the biology and say, all right, the brain can handle some of this, but I really need to think first and foremost about parameters around it. Okay. So I think a lot of us are scrolling because we just kind of get sucked into this addictive tendency. The second question to ask though is like, here's a very, I think, a very freeing and a very powerful definition for addiction. Addiction, there's so much shame around. So, first of all, I am so anti humiliation and so anti shame because it literally shuts down all forms of progress. Like, it's just such a scourge. Okay. So, there's so much shame around when we do things like scroll all day. I think we can feel really bad about ourselves. Like, we're losers and we're not motivated. And, all right. Well, the truth about any type of addiction, and I don't mean addiction with a capital A. I just mean we're kind of doing these things over and over and over again, and we seem to like not be able to stop. Is it's ritualized self soothing. I feel bad. Well, thank God your brain does something to try to help you feel less bad. Like, in other words, going back to my hand on the hot stove, if my brain was like, so just keep it there for 25 to 45 minutes, and it would be like a disaster. So when you're in pain, your biology is exquisite and your brain is like, let's get you out of here. So I think though, what happens to a lot of us is we're like, okay, yeah, like this did numb it for a while or this did distract for a while, but like it's not trending in the direction I want to go with my life. So then I ask this really powerful question. Tell me the parts I don't want to feel. Well, I don't really want to feel the fact that I'm lonely. Well, I don't really want to feel the fact that I'm overworked. Well, I don't really want to feel the fact that like parenting is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And my like, I feel I try so hard for my kids and I feel disconnected. I, okay, great. But until I'm willing to face the parts that I'm not willing to face, you can see how ritualized self soothing is my only option. Yes? I wanna say something too. Can I tell a story?
Please do.
Okay. So, I think when I, talk about this term pain, there's a sort of a natural biological tendency to recoil, like, it's like, who would want to but I feel like I've been put on this planet to share one message, and this is the reason I wrote Energy Rising. Okay. And I am totally on fire for I've been approached to do other projects and I've always turned them down. But I felt like this opportunity to speak to people about this relationship between the brain, emotional pain, and emotional power, I just feel like I'm on this planet to do this. Every single thing that you want in this lifetime that you do not have is on the other side of the feelings you keep telling yourself you cannot feel.
Hmm.
We all say we want more confidence. The only way to get more confident is, for example, to come into a new relationship with my nervous system and doubt. The only way for me to have more peace is to come into a new relationship, for example, with uncertainty. If I want more influence, I work with a lot of people who want more influence. I need to come into a new relationship with rejection. Can you see, like, let me just give an, because I think this will clarify. Let's say I'm trying to start a business. But I know because I'm rational, like, you just look around, you're like, not everyone is gonna like every single thing you do, right? So, like, let's say I have a widget. I know that, like, some people might like my widget, but I also know that other people are not gonna like my widget. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So, if I have not made the unconscious, conscious, and done the nervous system work, it doesn't matter. If a car is rolling down the highway at 100 miles an hour and it's about to hit you, your brain is just going to move you out of the way you're going to have no conscious awareness of this, right? So we have to really understand the brain is so wired for survival and so good at what it does. It's not waiting for your thinking brain, which by the way is like 50,000 years old. It's not even that old. To like be like, well, okay, Julia, so there's a car and the car looks like you'd be flat like a pancake, okay?
Sure.
So if I kind of say like, I'm going to sell this widget, and then I start to sell the widget and some people on social media are like, this widget's dumb. I bought your widget and I don't really like your widget. Or I bought somebody else's widget and they have a better widget. Now, meanwhile, there might be 10, 20, 40 people who are saying how great my widget is, but there's like two people who don't like my widget. What happens to my nervous system? If my nervous system can say, okay, I hear they don't like it, and I can hold that. Then my 40 people can grow to 60 people. And now there might be four people who'd say, I really don't like your widget. But if I start to sell my widget and 10 people like it and two people don't like it, and I am obsessed with the two people who don't, they really don't like it. I guess this is a bad product. I'm going to spend all my time to try to make them happy. Well, now by 10 happy customers, now can you see how until I'm able to handle rejection, I can't have more influence. Until I'm able to come into a new relationship with uncertainty, I can't have more peace. Until I can have a new relationship with doubt, I can't have more confidence. So, what I actually think, and this is, I think, is the greatest paradox on the planet, is these horrible feelings, anxiety, stress, inadequacy, doubt, that most of us spend our entire lives trying to run from. They are not here to torment us. They are calling us into our next level of power. When I start to see these because listen, I'm not going to bullshit you. They feel bad. That's what bad feelings are.
Yeah.
When I start to see that, and the thing that kind of drives me a little bit crazy is so I am a daughter of I come from a lineage of psychologists.
Okay.
So my father is a psychologist, and I really grew up. I mean, I he used to read to me from his textbooks, so I've been following the mental health conversation for depending on how you want to, 40 some years. We are very clear on the physical health side how to become stronger. So if I can only hold 5 pounds, I go to the gym and I have to now lift 10. I can't lift two. I certainly can't stay on my couch and just eat hot Cheetos and scroll on Netflix all night long. Now, there might be days I don't want to go to the gym, but I'm not confused. I'm not saying, how did I not get stronger when I only lifted 2 pounds or when I stayed on my couch? I'm not confused. Here's the other piece of the physical health side. When I go to lift, let's say a 20-pound dumbbell, I'm like, okay, I've worked my way up. My muscles literally shake. Or if I go for a walk or I go for a run and it's kind of stretching me, I've hit my kind of edge of emotional or physical power in this example, I will start to sweat. My heart will start to pound. Never in the history of doing this has someone been like, oh my God, my muscle is shaking at the gym. Please, someone quick, call 911. This is a catastrophe. Then I flee from the gym, never to return ever, ever, ever again. For a lot of us, we don't actually like the sensation of like our muscles shaking when we work out. And yet we find it satisfying because it's the clearest evidence that we are getting stronger.
Yeah.
So that shake is actually evidence of our increasing strength, which is what allows us to endure and tolerate, and some of us even like that sensation. It feels good on some level. It is the exact same thing on the emotional side. If I, for example, want to have, here's a great one, I want to start publicly speaking more, okay? If you threw me and said, okay, you're now going to do the State of the Union address, my nervous system would just melt away. I would just collapse, right?
Sure.
But, maybe I say, "Okay, today I'm gonna write a blog post," and that feels like a little makes me a little bit anxious. Today, you know what? Forget these, I'm gonna tell you a real example. I, as an academic, would we would prepare for these big conferences, and we would prepare for I I'm not I mean, you could prepare for years to give a 20-minute talk, you understand what I'm saying? Because 'Cause you're with your data sets and you had every slide, and you had every contingency, and da 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 da. Okay, so then I released Energy Rising into the world, and the book has been getting a lot of attention. So I started getting more and more interview requests, and when I first thought I was gonna do interviews, I just almost unconsciously thought I would need to prepare for the interviews the same way I prepared for my conference presentations. But this was impossible now because I was doing many a day. I have small kids. I work with a lot of organizations and leaderships. I treat patients. I just didn't have the time in the day to over prepare like that. So I had to have a conversation with myself about what is the more powerful pain. Am I going to quit and say, I will not do any interviews for this book that I love and adore and think is really transformative for the world? Or am I going to figure out how to get out there and shake? And I said, Julia, you cannot both try to lead this message and not walk the work. So for the first interviews that I did, I'm not kidding you, my hands were sweating, my throat was literally shaking, you know how your voice is like quivering. My heart was pounding, but because I was getting put in this environment, so it was very intense, and there was some frequency. It's like if I go to the gym once a year and lift 50 pounds and never return, who cares? If I go to the gym every single day and lift a half a pound, I lift a pen, who cares? So it's like I need to hit this like sweet spot of frequency and intensity. So I was getting on these interviews. They felt very high stakes. Super on fire for the book and really wanted to do it justice. And I was shaking, but very quickly, my nervous system grew into a new level of emotional power. And I thought, I can do this. And then my body calmed down. My hands didn't sweat as much. My heart didn't pound. My voice. Now, every single time I do an interview, I still get nervous. I'm a little bit nervous right now. Am I going to blank out? Am I going to? And I go with it. The goal cannot be no pain because this is a phantom option. It's like, go find me and no aging. Go find me no gravity. We have studies where you put people in a room, just a room. The experiment's a setup because they're actually testing, can people sit with themselves? And there's an electrical shock machine in the room. And rather than just sit with themselves, people love to talk about mindfulness. Like, this could have been a great opportunity to just be mindful or meditate or think about your day. People start to literally shock themselves. What this is really showing is that just being inside of our own bodies is sometimes going to be uncomfortable enough, distressing enough, like boredom hurts. Everybody hates being bored, right? So it's like this idea that we could ever have a good enough job or a good enough relationship or a good enough career, it's wholly untrue. And so the power play here is to really renegotiate this relationship with the nervous system.
And is that done through training and experience by facing those uncomfortable situations? And how do you know if you're taking on too much at once, for example?
Great question. So I do an exercise in energy rising called Hold Your Emotional Shake, and I'll kind of do an abbreviated version of it here. So I'll just use public speaking, but you can, if you want me to use a different example, I can. So let's say I want to public speak more. I would make a really simple list and I would rank things that kind of are super easy to super hard, 0 being the easiest and 10 being the hardest, okay? And I would say I really wouldn't worry about if I was really interested in getting fitter, I wouldn't worry about 0 to 6 cuz like that's probably not going to put enough pressure on my body to make the muscle stronger, right? We have to understand resistance. So let's say I said, okay, the first thing would be sending out an email to all my friends and family telling them that I started a blog, and that would be like a 7. Another thing would be, now what's really cool about this is it doesn't because of the way emotions work, emotions are tethered to emotion. Emotion is not tethered to situation. So I'm gonna explain this. This is a really important piece that people want to. So I might also think it's a 7 to ever tell somebody that they messed up my order. So, for example, if I go to Starbucks and I order a black coffee and they put cream in my coffee, I'm like, God, I really don't like cream, but they're so busy, and I just feel bad, and I really shouldn't. So the idea of saying, "Hey, I know you're so busy. I'm happy to wait, but like you got my order wrong. Would you mind correcting it?" Maybe that's a 7 for me. I start to think like, what's a 7 level of pressure? What's a 7 level of stress? What's an 8 level? What's a 9 level? What's a 10 level? You with me?
Yep.
And what's cool about this is it could be anything. And because emotions are not tethered to situation, there could be things with my family of origin. There could be things with social media. There could be, maybe I make an anonymous post a lot of the time, but now I'm going to really show my face because, and that's like a 9 for me, So you really you have so many degrees of freedom here. And I think that makes people feel really good. And then we kind of go to this Goldilocks model. So you definitely, I wouldn't start just like I wouldn't go to the gym if I haven't worked out and try to pick up 100 pounds. I also wouldn't go to the gym and pick up 1 pound. So I would say, what feels like there's some resistance here. Not too hot, not too cold, the Goldilocks just right. And for a lot of us, it's our own level 6, 7, or 8. That's usually a good place to start.
Okay.
And then you do it, and you start to say, like, this is not only could I do this has made me feel so much better. I feel freer. I feel more confident. I feel less burdened. Because when we hold the emotional energy inside of us and we want to do something, but we don't, it creates this resistance that really sinks our life. So, in other words, if I want to speak up, but I keep my mouth shut, that dissonance of I want to speak up, my emotional system is saying speak up, but my behavioral system is keeping my mouth shut. Are you with me?
Hmm.
That dissonance is a weight that's gonna it's not free. This is why I'm so on fire for avoidance. The greatest public health issue is avoidance. So now I hate myself. I don't trust myself, and there's a consequence to this. I call this behavioral math or emotional physics. I want to speak up enough and I keep my mouth shut enough. You do it once in a while, no problem. That's called good judgment. That's called emotional intelligence, right? But if I'm chronically keeping my mouth shut, especially in relationship, especially really to my boss and my husband and my very logically, your emotional system is going to go, well, this isn't good. And it's going to start to feel heavy, lethargic, depressed. And then people feel numb. They feel exhausted. It's a very logical consequence. And I think even this can be really healing because a lot of times we can feel like our lives are just being done to us. Like I'm a victim to like, I just feel exhausted. I just feel burnt out. I just feel, but a lot of times we are participating in our own destruction in ways that we're not fully owning. And so if I just realize like, oh, I am the one, I am the one who keeps stepping on the nail. Is there a way for me to step differently? I think this becomes very redeeming and very life-giving.
So you've touched on this a little bit, the the difference between hyperarousal and hypoarousal. Maybe first you can just explain what each of those mean, and then we can talk about how that shows up in our lives.
Absolutely. Such a good question. So, in a perfect world, the idea is like we're all going for balance, right? And I love making connections between our life, our nervous system, and nature, right? Like everything is in harmony. Nature's in harmony when things are in balance. Similarly, you want your nervous system to be in a state of you're attentive, but you're relaxed when you're. I mean, that's the ideal state. But for a lot of us, we're in this state of because we live lives that really are disrespectful to the body. We're not moving, we're on front of screens all the time, we don't eat well, and then we just have so much stress. We're not sleeping well. I mean, all these things can get out of alignment. We feel chronically stressed. There's not a single person in this country who hasn't heard of, chronic stress, right? Because everybody feels it and everybody's talking about it. So then your nervous system kind of gets in this hyper aroused state. And the best way to describe the hyper aroused state is like that sensation of like waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Like I go on vacation and I can't really enjoy it because I'm just thinking about all the emails that are building up in my inbox. Or even at the end of the day, like I can't really be present with my kids because there's more that I could be doing at work. And now I feel like a bad mom because I'm not really present with my, it just goes on and on and on. Well, vigilance. So one of the key features of trauma, and again, trauma exists on a continuum, but one of the key features of something like PTSD or any kind of traumatic response is this idea of hypervigilance. I'm going to patrol the perimeter. I'm going to patrol the perimeter. I'm going to patrol the perimeter. Make sure any danger, any incoming missiles. Let me look, let me look, let me look. The problem with this is patrolling the perimeter takes a ton of energy. So after a certain point in time, the body says no. And what can happen is I can go from a very, very energy intensive state of hypervigilance or hyperarousal, swing the pendulum to the other side to hypoarousal. And this is me just feeling you heard people use this term a lot, languishing during the pandemic, because people were just like, whoa, my God, is everything melting right now? Like, what in the world is happening? So, all that vigilance and then like nowhere to go and nothing to do and feeling really helpless can swing it to just like, I'm going to lay on this couch. And I only have enough energy to operate my thumb to scroll. That's it.
Yeah. Mhm.
And for a lot of us, we will oscillate between these things even in a day. So I'll be super, super aroused all day long, and then I'll come home and I'll be like, I can barely make it through dinner with my family. So it's like I burn the candle and then I crash and then I try to burn the candle and I crash and I burn. So it's just this kind of like rocking from this very hyper aroused state of the nervous system to this very hypo aroused state of the nervous system. And then it's like a lot of times people, again, I said a lot of my work, if I had a word, it would be kind of counterintuitive. People say, well, okay, I just need to rest. Self care. Here's the problem. If you have conditioned your nervous system to understand that your baseline should be this kind of hyperarousal, rest will feel like torture. People don't understand. So people say, I just can't rest. Your brain, that's not exactly it. Okay. And if we really want to untangle our lives, we have to understand how the brain is controlling it. The brain goes, no, girl, do not sit down at that kitchen table. Because if you sit down at that kitchen table and really exhale, you are going to get slaughtered. So the brain says, you want to know what's not safe? Resting. Now think about this. So I do a lot of work with PTSD. I do a lot of non-clinical work. So a lot of work with, parent coaching, and I do a lot of work with very senior leaders and people, entrepreneurs, things like this. So big range of emotion and relationships. But this is a really important point. You cannot diagnose PTSD in the middle of a war because the hypervigilance, the inability to sleep, the jumpiness, the looking over your shoulder is wildly adaptive if I am in the middle of a war. So PTSD cannot be diagnosed in the middle of trauma. So where's the war? Now your brain is so invested in survival that it's going to say, well, we're not going to wait to see if the car hits us. We're going to armor up so the car can't even come near us. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I need to start, I will tell you, I work with a lot of type A, high performing, overachieving, over people pleasing, over functioning people. I am one myself, okay? In the spirit of transparency.
Guilty as charged. Yeah.
Yeah, right? Um, so I believe that we have two main levers of emotional power at our disposal. One is a lever of strength. This is kind of this idea of will, this idea of my own hustle, my own grit, my own grind, my own effort. Okay. This is this idea of really doing. So my lever of strength. But you also have another wildly powerful lever at your disposal, and it is the lever of surrender. I went surfing in the ocean once, and it was like the worst. I was like, this is the most exhausting thing. So I live in Chicago, not really near an ocean, but when I was in Hawaii, and I was just like watching all of these surfers, it was like mesmerizing because like they would use their effort, and that board was so big, and obviously the current, and it was like a humbling experience too because like I'm a good swimmer, but I could not get it at all. So, but to watch them use their effort, use their lever of strength to put the board out, and then watch them really like understand how to surrender and let go. Do surrender. Do surrender. And I think a lot of us are so on the doing. It's like we can't really access this other lever, and we think it's all the doing that's going to keep us safe, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's this integration. The healthiest brain is a brain that we call a functionally integrated brain. The healthiest form of nature is when nature is integrated, right? Like the oceans are connecting to the rivers and the trees are, it's like it's all got to work together. A lot of us are totally out of alignment because we're just in this doing energy and there's none of this being energy. Well, we got to really look at that. And so then it becomes, I think that the most emotionally powerful thing to do is to trust.
Yeah.
So I say, listen, I know without a shred of doubt, this idea of a more powerful pain, I need rest because if I don't rest, bad things are kind of on the horizon. When I rest, I understand at first I will have to kind of puncture this pain barrier. Like the first time I rest, it's gonna feel bad. And I'm gonna say, I should get up and do laundry, or I could bang out a few more emails. Okay, fine. Do you wanna do that? No, that's not what we're doing here. Okay. So then I say, I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to hold my emotional shake. But I promise you, if I make a commitment to rest and I do it for a month, by the end of that month, I'm going to have it's going to happen that quickly. Okay. The nervous system is very smart. So when you show it, you're not going to get hit by a bomb. Your nervous system goes, oh, you mean I could actually let go of this energy? Because hypervigilance is costing me a lot too.
Yeah.
Okay. So I hold my emotional shake for, I don't know, 2 weeks, 30 days. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, this is actually quite lovely. I like have a bath or I have a glass of wine or I just go in a room by myself and just, I have a, I have a willow tree in a pond and I just love to look at my willow tree in my pond. That's it. Okay. So then it's like, okay, this starts to be safe. Well, I also have to say in those moments, there are emails that are not getting responded to that could be responded to. I'm going to trust that it's going to be okay. And the biggest reason it's easy to trust is because the version of it not being okay is a version I don't even fucking want anyway.
Yeah.
In other words, if the only way I can be successful around here is to be haggard, to overwork, to overgive, to overfunction, to overplease, to overdeliver, have it.
So if you find that you keep repeating those patterns, the overs, as you call them, right? What are some actionable things that these type A's and overachievers can do to make sure that they are practicing the other side of that?
Yes. So we could have a whole conversation about this. So I'm going to try to do this. Okay, so the overs are anything like overworking, overgiving, overdoing, overdelivering, overfunctioning. I mean, there's a million of them, right? There is a galactic difference between work and overwork. There is a galactic difference between giving and overgiving. So when I give, it's very joyful. When I overgive, it's always and only coming from the energy of fear. When I work, I think a lot of us are turned on by our work. When I overwork, it is always and only coming from the energy of fear, right? It's this idea of like, well, I got to overwork because the people in quotes, the people will be mad at me, or the people will not think I'm relevant, or okay? So pleasure, desire on one hand versus fear. All right. Well, so we overwork. Now, this is what the brain is doing. The brain is saying, oh my God, you told me there's something to be afraid of. So great. I'm going to just put you in hyperdrive. So you're going to overwork, overgive, overdo, overfunction. The problem with this, though, is that every time I overwork or overgive and I survive it, this is very, very important. The brain is a pattern detection machine that calibrates based on the evidence our life feeds it. A very simple way to say this is learning. This is what learning is, right? Like I learn how to do math, I learn who's safe, I learn what and my brain calibrates that, but it calibrates based on the evidence our life feeds to it. So if I stay up till 2 in the morning, or if I kiss somebody's ass, let's say I kiss somebody's ass, and I say, well, the reason that I'm still in this marriage, or the reason I'm still at this job, or the reason is because I kissed somebody's ring, so to speak. My brain goes, see, that was a good strategy. We got it. We got it. So I'm going to appease more. Now, the problem with overworking, like any addiction, overgiving, any addiction, you see, these are all addictions too, is by nature of what an addiction is there is always an increasing demand for the activity that soothes the nervous system. In other words, if you could be like, well, I would only overwork by 30 minutes a day. I think most people would be like, if that's what you need to feel right, go ahead, give yourself 30 minutes a day. But it doesn't. It just creeps and it creeps and it creeps and it creeps because that is the nature of the addictive processes. So I need to say, I am trying to overwork or overgive or over accommodate to be safe. The more I try to do that, it's actually your brains, and I talk about this a lot in chapter 4, which is basically the neuroenergetics of certainty. I'm overworking and overgiving. I'm doing the overs to create certainty, to create safety. But it's actually another huge paradox, my willingness to do the overs that is the most dangerous thing in my life.
Sure.
That is actually the greatest form of self-injury. And that form of self-injury is not theoretical. It's not abstract. It is actually happening every day, all day in my life. Okay. So I now need to say, all right, well, if I'm trying to get to safety, and the only reason I'm doing all this overworking and over accommodating is because I want to be safe. But you're saying the more I do it, more unsafe I become. What do I need to do? Here is a moment. The opposite of certainty is not uncertainty. The opposite of uncertainty is not certainty. The opposite of uncertainty is trust. So I need to start saying to myself, I'm going to rest tonight and I'm going to trust. I feel like I really want to be in conversations. I constantly feel lonely. I constantly feel excluded. I'm going to ask myself really powerful questions. What are the ways in which I give myself reason to doubt my ability to trust myself? This is a huge question. So if I say, for example, I swear to God, I'm going to get up tomorrow morning and work out, and I don't, what does that do to me? If I say to myself, I hate the way that he talks to me, I hate the way he talks to me, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. I'm gonna say something, and I don't. What does that do to me? If I say I'm exhausted, I'm gonna rest, and I don't, what does that do to my relationship and my ability to trust myself? Those are very clear examples that I guarantee will resonate with everyone. And so then what happens is we are unsafe, but we've confused the target of the unsafety, saying, "Oh God, the reason I'm unsafe is because my boss or my partner expects so much, so let me overwork." But really, the more fundamental source of the unsafety is from my own willingness to protect myself.
Yeah.
So I say, okay, they don't call me. They don't call me. We've all had that. Every single one of us, even as adults, where our feelings get hurt. Well, could couldn't I call? Yeah, but if they really loved me, they would call me. It's this very childish coding. There's no shame in it at all. I just actually had a call, and someone was sort of talking about how we kind of have these childhood patterns in us, and like they're not good or bad. They just are. It's just nature. It's like part of the childhood remains in the nervous system. So I say like, well, they don't really like me. Well, maybe I don't really if I liked myself enough, maybe I would go get the relationships that I need. Maybe I would say like, okay, you've invited me to the party for 3 times. I'm sorry, like I keep calling you, I keep calling you. I wish that you would call me. Well, I understand that. But a lot of times too, we got to be more generous to other people. A lot of times they're not calling us because they're at their own capacity.
Yeah.
They're drowning in their own they're not like, "You know who I'm really not gonna call tonight?
Right.
Julia. I know she really wants me to call, but I'm not. I'm gonna make her suffer." They're drowning in their own horror movie. They're busy overworking, overgiving, over so it's like, how can I participate in my own rescue? But in order to participate in my own rescue, I have to really understand the agents of my destruction, and the agents of my destruction is often a misunderstanding of my own emotional experience.
Oof. That is so powerful, so to speak. No, no pun intended. But we could definitely talk all day. We're almost up until the time, so I want to make sure we reserve a little bit of time for you to talk about where folks can find you and your excellent book, Energy Rising.
Thank you. You were a wonderful host, had a great time. Hope this was helpful to people.
Absolutely.
So you can find me. So obviously you can find Energy Rising wherever books are sold. And if people are interested, Energy Rising is broken down into 8 neuroenergetic codes that really clearly describe how to work powerfully with your nervous system and emotional energy. And I could talk about this stuff until the cows come home. So if this lights you up, join me on social media. I'm on, Instagram at Dr. Julia DiGangi, LinkedIn, Dr. Julia DiGangi, and Facebook. I'm just Julia DiGangi, not Dr. Julia DiGangi. And then I have a website, doctor, that's drjuliadigangi.com.
Well, Dr. DeGangi, thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us today. This is a fantastic interview. Really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me.
Hey there, thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the Fat Burning Man Show. Before you go, please hit like and subscribe, or even better, leave us a quick review, which helps other people find their way to this free show. We've recorded over 400 episodes of this award-winning show over the past decade and change, and you can watch every single episode for free at fatburningman.com. So if you can think of a friend or a family member who might enjoy and benefit from our work, please take a quick second to share it with someone you care about. Thank you so much for all of your reviews, comments, likes, emails, and the kind words you send our way. We couldn't do any of this without you. Now, a quick disclaimer. The Fat Burning Man Show provides general information and discussions about health and related subjects and is not intended as medical advice, nor is the information a substitute for professional medical expertise, diagnosis, or treatment. If you or any other person has a medical concern, I wholeheartedly encourage you to consult with your healthcare provider. Now, before I sign off, don't forget to join our newsletter at fatburningman.com. When you sign up with your email, I'll send you a wild quick start guide along with a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes. This is Abel James signing off. Thanks so much for listening and have a great week.